Hi there gamers, good to see ya. It's Shep from Gaming Introspection. The new year is upon us, filled with boundless opportunities for the future. I mean, come on! Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is coming out in less than 2 months. Hopefully, you've had some time off for yourselves. And when we have that extra time, sometimes we sit back and reflect on classic moments. Or classic games. Presenting the Final Fantasy Ultimania Archive. This is the second volume. You can get Volume 1, which spans the NES and SNES entries, or Volume 3, specializing in the PS2 era games and beyond. But we're focusing on Entry 2, the ultimate in nostalgia for millennial-aged gamers. In our youth, 3D was just getting going, production values were improving, and the leaps and bounds from one console to the next were huge! Unlike today, when it's like, hey fanboy, my system has 8 Zen 2 cores, so mine does too, and they run at a slightly faster processing speed. Oh yeah, well I almost got 11 teraflops. Ah, you wiener, I have 12 teraflops. But single player narrative stories, but Game Pass, but Grand Theft Auto. Oh yeah, it's sweet, we both have that, don't we? Things were simply better back then. But I digress. This archive dives deep into the PS1 entries, Final Fantasy VII through 9. It uses the same basic setup for each of the 3 chapters, beginning with introductory concept art, the broad story, and a character map, before zooming in on individual characters. You're then treated to an expansive world map that then homes in on several important locations, tons of monster and boss content, followed by a grand expanse of concept art from various minutiae across the games that even some die-hard fans wouldn't have known about, and finally ending with a memories section, as well as other miscellaneous items from each game. These collections aren't cheap. Not many hardcover books are, I guess. They're upwards of $50 Canadian on Amazon, so it's wise to investigate what you're in for before you buy it. Sit back and relax as we peruse the Final Fantasy Ultimania Archive, beginning with a game that's on the top of many fans' lists, Final Fantasy VII. If you're worried about complete regurgitation, the concept art that begins each of these chapters will put you at ease. In all 3 of the game's cases, the stark contrast to this and the final version style that we're all familiar with will throw you off at first. But there's some awesome stuff here, demonstrating early or discarded designs, and this artwork simply isn't easy to find anywhere else. Looking at Cloud and Red together in various poses, or Aerith in this brand new way, it simply makes one wonder how the game would have been received if these templates were used. Soon after, you're given a brief overview of the setting and conflict, followed by a very handy character map that uses simple direction arrows and messages to catch you up on who's got a crush on who. Damn! Cloud, he's a lady killer! Or the convoluted webbing of characters like Vincent, Lucretia, and Sephiroth, revealing just how all the secondary characters fit interconnectedly into the bigger picture. After reading through each of the 3, it's clear that Final Fantasy VII puts a bit more detail and emphasis on the protagonists. Cloud gets a lot of attention here, spanning quite a few pages, and this is what makes the collection worth it. You get so many different designs, complete with developer notes, and even specialized drawings for when they were designing him on the motorbike. If you're a fan of characters, the Final Fantasy VII section will impress you the most, although 9's, as we'll see, is also quite strong. You get interesting, memorable quotes and nostalgic scenes that any avid Final Fantasy fan will be able to reminisce about easily, like Cloud's amnesia creating his Zack-like persona and his inevitable, unbreakable link with Sephiroth throughout the growing conflict of the story. It continues with his companions, giving readers glimpses into Tifa's child design, and referencing all of her dominant character traits, like her inability to confess her feelings for Cloud multiple times until the fated night under the High Wind, and her feminine qualities when she makes Barret and Cloud go up the stairs first because, well, yeah. What's with Square including these types of gross moments? They do it in Final Fantasy IX too, with Zidane's perverted comments. Not exactly a proud tradition, but hey, it's entertaining to reminisce on. We were once teenagers too, after all. Aerith, Barret, and the rest of the gang also have some highlight reel stuff. Some things I never knew about before, like Aerith having always wanted to take a ride on the Highwind and explore. I don't remember that from the script. And it completely goes against what she says at the end of Remake.
I miss it. The steel sky.
Barrett's original design is... well, take a look at this. Damn. Overkill much? Let's attach a machine gun to this guy's arm. I don't know. Is that masculine enough? Hell no! He's still got another hand. Hell yeah, he does. Well, let's do something with that. Yeah! I got it! We'll have him shoot things with another gun! you brilliant guy! I know. I know. Holy crap! I'm glad they scaled him back, at least a little bit, because as the memorable quotes show, he doesn't have much restraint in his personality. I'm growing fonder of the remake as I reflect, because the Barret in that game was much more sophisticated, capable of leading and inspiring speeches.
Y'all gotta look at the bigger picture here. Nothing worth fighting for was ever won without sacrifice. But it's okay, cause I'm here for you, to help take the load off your shoulders.
Here, it just references his short fuse, like this. Going, gone! Ugh, not a lot of subtlety in the PlayStation version. Vincent, he also has some freaking unreal drawings that showcase his Limit Break designs, as well as this unexpected early draft version where he used a sickle instead of his now trademark gun. Reminds me of Magus and Chrono Trigger. Red 13 has some interesting tidbits. This throwaway design sketch ended up being his animation when he gets hurt. And did you know that the pups he runs with in the game's ending likely spawned from his girlfriend, who he interacts with in Dirge of Cerberus? I had no idea. Haven't played it. Also, who knew Sid and Shara did eventually get married in that game? Makes me want to check it out. Didn't have a clue, especially after conversations like this led us to believe that there was no possible future, at least on any deeper level. The authors pick some prime moments for the secondary characters too, like Palmer when he gets hit by a truck, suggesting his extra girth saved him from fatal injury. Or that rare rude quote that players can stumble across if you step on him after beating him at Rocket Town. The concept art is a bit repetitive in some pages. Most of these were in the basic instruction manual for Final Fantasy VII, and have been posted ad nauseum in many other magazines and websites. Some of the points aren't too thrilling, or they're simply things that everyone already knew before. But you can't expect every single sentence made to be awestruck behind the scenes content that no one's ever seen up to now. And for what is unexpected, it's awesome. Small towns like Calm were initially developed with a much brighter, happier color scheme. You got early developmental footage, which was still based in a sprite-based style like Final Fantasy VI. They even have Locke from that game as a placeholder character. And did you know the huge city, Midgar, used to be known as Zamal? Can you imagine that being uttered by every Final Fantasy fan? And in-game character? The Zamal slums. In the past, Wutai was at war with Zamal. The Shinra Company ruled the entirety of Zamal. Nope, I just can't picture it any different. Hard pass. Let's examine the enemies. There's some tidbits that'll raise your awareness, much like how the humble guard dog enemy was originally designed with headlight-emitting eyes, which would have caught intruders before they got too far. The famous Apps boss is exquisitely detailed. There's so many notes about animations matching its image, how the tongue needs to keep its deformed look. Oh, it's insane. This is accompanied by more concept art of enemies like hedgehog pies and those helicopter flying soldiers. They look strikingly similar to how they're presented in the remake, which is just awesome. Another one that was redone with amazing accuracy is Don Corneo. His sleazy, good-for-nothing image translates into his animations and sounds in the remake absolutely perfectly, in my opinion.
Nice. Very nice. Oh. Shall I pick you? Yeah.
The enemy sections even have trivia I was oblivious to, like stealing right arms from bomb enemies. What the hell is a right arm doing within a flaming entity? What right arm are they talking about? And why is it such a thing for gamers to steal? It seems kind of barbaric and messed up to me. Other notes are just so matter of fact, like the behemoth. Strong. That's it. Yeah, thanks, Tips. Would have guessed that from looking at the sheer size and scale of the thing. Storyboards aren't everyone's jam. They're honestly tough to see all the text and are such rough drafts, it can be hard to know what the intentions or actions are. But for me, they're just amazing. Seeing how each of the summons were designed when they crafted what was, back then, amazing cinematic scenes from this scratch. Look at the intensity on Titan's face as he lifts and rearranges the earth. Or even individual limit breaks like Blade Beam, seeing the thought process behind them. There's even discarded animations, like one where Cloud casts Blizzard. He had this whole action board planned of him doing crazy things with his sword and sticking it in the ground. We never see that. This applies to limits too. Apparently Aerith and Barret had techniques that didn't quite make the cut. Other things that do happen, I had no idea. Like when Cloud does his victory pose, he puts his sword on his back onto a magnet. I had no idea that this was planned right from the beginning. I always assumed Cloud held onto his sword physically, even when it was placed on his back. But that magnet that's prominent in the remake, it was always there, from day one. Cool things like this are, well, they're cool. Finally, we have to take a look at some of the insane details shown on the most selective of machinery and vehicles from Final Fantasy VII. Look at the range of statistics they included for everything. Every vehicle imaginable has their horsepower, flight range, engine construction, maximum speed, output, RPMs, number of passengers, weight. It's absolutely ridiculous. Everything from that one-time submarine you pilot for 5 minutes, to the elite Shinra helicopter, to the vital statistics and number of staff on the Gold Saucer ropeway, and even the measurements of the snowboard are here. So unnecessary. But if you enjoy nerding the heck out of insignificant data, this section will more than satisfy your lust for numbers and detail. All in all, Final Fantasy VII is the strongest entry in this collection. It's the longest, has a prime showcase of interesting characters and artwork, while featuring obscure facts that will be valued by any FF7 collector. Unfortunately, Final Fantasy VIII, much like its game of origin, isn't given the same type of hype and attention in this book. There's still plenty for fans to enjoy though, so let's take a look. Hey, rhyming for the win. While the design and structure of everything is the same, there's just not as much here. Even the concept art designs are more blah. Is this really supposed to be Squall? This looks just like a zombified guy who's also possibly melting. Must be really early versions. There's still a lot of cool memory sections that effectively show impactful moments in the story, like when Squall can't handle being talked about in the past tense, when Cypher is thought to be dead. It also highlights the romantic/love theme that dominates the game, zooming in on moments like Squall handing over Rinoa to the S-Star people, then realizing, damn, I'm a heartless dumbass, and going back to free the girl he loves, even though he needs level-headed people like Quistis to convince him of such a simple truth. Crafting interdependent relationships with deeper revelations and progression was a real strength of Final Fantasy VIII compared to VII. Each of the teenagers just seems to have more to them, and it shows up in several key areas. We get reminded several times of how complicated Quistis' feelings are towards Squall, as in, is it just frustration, romantic, student/teacher, or a confusing combination? There's some great choices of quotes showing how Zell's more than just the comic relief. Actually, he's the most serious about staying true to the orders in the landing mission. The quotes also showcase Selphie's happy-go-lucky enthusiasm that is absolutely contagious. One that certainly stands out is Irvine's initially calm demeanor being used as a facade for his deep insecurity and his inability to shoot the sorceress, who in actuality was Matron, the guardian and caretaker
of most of the party in their youth, with his hesitation stemming from his ability to actually remember all of this, since he hasn't developed amnesia yet due to the functioning of Guardian forces, which are junctioned to the rest of the party and gradually erode their memories.
That was heavy and convoluted, wasn't it? But that's exactly what Final Fantasy VIII is, and likely also why it's such a divisive entry for fans in the series.
Other than that, each character and major enemy has their background fairly well described in the Ultimania. Cid struggles to lead the mercenary Seeds against the sorceress, which is revealed to be his own wife, while also having to get funding from a greedy, bloated pussbag Norg. Laguna is supposedly a writer, but damn, he has such a bad way with words and embarrassing interactions towards women that it's a miracle he was able to eventually secure a loving relationship with Rain. And the main character Squall, only implied to be related with Laguna in the game, has his familial proof mentioned in a couple different places here. With such out there themes of unreciprocated love, betrayal and greed, time travel, sending different people's consciousness into the past, using the power of love to survive in space without air, and the like, Final Fantasy VIII benefits the most from the information presented in the Ultimania. Even veteran fans may have forgotten how interlocked all of these events, themes, and characters are. However, the storyboards aren't as varied or as plentiful as 7's. One of them is simply a long, boring sketch version of the ending shot through a video camera. It goes frame by frame and is pretty much the same for long stretches. This is amazing in the actual game, but here, it just looks like a bunch of the same stuff over and over. I mean, compare the two, and you'll quickly choose the final version over this long, drawn-out clip show of slightly different sketches. There's not as much background imagery for any of the characters either, and not much in the way of new or out-of-the-ordinary facts like Final Fantasy VII's. Even the vehicle designs, despite them being more prominent than ever in Final Fantasy VIII, have barely any details attached to them, save for the awesome Ragnarok spaceship, which apparently travels 12 kilometers a second!
Yeah, that's roughly 40,000 kilometers an hour. Have you ever wondered how fast the Ragnarok flies? Well, now you know.
Despite the lack of substance compared to 7, it's a worthwhile read, in that you'll still find things that you didn't know before. For example, I had no idea Rinoa's dog Angelo was female in the game. It even describes that Rinoa saved up some money secretly to pay for her at a pet shop, falling in love with it. Stuff that the game just glances over, as if it really didn't matter. Speaking of Rinoa, some great choices of quotes like, "You're going to like me, you're going to like me." That was just awesome seeing it in real time.
What if that quote from the book is legit, and Squall's entire journey and love story resulted from that simple hypnotic trance that Rinoa did? I mean, she does have the powers of sorcery, eventually.
Another one some fans may not know about is how the Guardian forces even factor into story segments within battles. If you obtain Odin in the game, in a scripted fight scene against Cypher, the former student pretty much kills him. But then suddenly Gilgamesh randomly appears with all these cool weapons and sends Cypher flying! The GFs are such a big part of the story and combat in Final Fantasy VIII, with so many hidden ones, and there's pages like this spread that do a great job in highlighting this fact. There's even info on getting the ultimate GF, Eden, from the Ultima weapon fight in the hidden Deep Sea Research Center. Finally, there's this weird UFO!
It's so random.
You can find it every now and then in random battles, but it just kind of goes off and you can't do anything. But if you go to the Highlands, you can actually attack it and confront this hilariously generic blue alien. Who knew? So you'll find some cool tidbits, just not as many as 7.
Let's investigate how the Ultimania handles Final Fantasy IX, the most recent entry featured here. So recent, it was only released 24 years ago. God damn, am I old.
Final Fantasy IX is bursting a bit more with energy and substance compared to 8, but to be honest, I'm not nearly as familiar with the characters or story as the other two games, having only played through it twice, and that was decades ago, as I've said. Still, there's some great concept art and initial designs for each character. They really outdid themselves, with comparisons that are right next to the finished designs. They're so unique. Zidane is half monkey, basically, which is really detailed in these notes and sketches. And there's other things like, whatever this thing is. I hated this character. It's just the most bland, undescript. Oh, I hate it. I just hate it. Regardless, you get an insider's view on each of them. It even has sketches on the huge range of facial expressions that would be incorporated into the movie clips in large story moments. Final Fantasy IX's cast was huge, which made sense as it harkened back to the series' roots, when a larger roster of characters had a more group feel compared to the core 1 or 2 protagonists that are the focus in Final Fantasy VII and 8. Each one has detailed moments and quirks that differentiated them from each other, and since Garnet and Zidane don't overpower the story as much, you have a better balanced look into everyone's vibe and how it plays in the story. Vivi has remained a lovable mainstay among fan favorites, and his tragic, short lifespan gets the attention and detail it deserves, answering some questions players may have had about his ultimate fate in the end. It's not happy like we want it to be, but somehow makes us feel good about how he left the world, validating his successful struggle to understand the fragile nature of life and live it to the fullest, which he was also able to share with other mages that the party encounters. Hey, at least he didn't end up a war machine, like that freak wizard thing that hunts the party down even through the sky. Zidane and the main antagonist, Kuja, were also artificially brought to life, and their backstory gets developed and shared well throughout the Ultimania's anecdotes and developer commentary. I enjoyed the fact that Final Fantasy IX's antagonist somehow finds salvation in the end, allowing the party to escape after recently realizing his own mortality, and thus actually knowing what it feels like to live, despite having missed the entirety of childhood as he was created fully formed. This makes his treatment of the Black Mages ironic, since he was created as a pawn by Garland in the Genome Project. It's convoluted, I hear ya, but he's an underrated antagonist in Final Fantasy history. Garnet has her key moments highlighted, like when she slashes her hair to free herself from the burdens and failures she'd been carrying with her up to that midpoint in the game. And we also get to enjoy Steiner's bumbling buffoonery. I remember him most from the game. He constantly fails, but is always trying to do the right thing. It's tough not to enjoy him always favoring Vivi, always despising Zidane, and fretting over the princess before awkwardly finding love with Beatrix, his former rival. Ah, Steiner. Don't ever change. The quotes and details of other characters remind me of just how bizarre the cast and how bizarre the developers are. We have a 6-year-old summoner girl who apparently falls in love twice with this teenage monkey-human hybrid. It's just, wow. Square had some different personalities on staff when this game was created, let me tell ya. Final Fantasy IX's chapter lacks the volume and detail of Final Fantasy VII and 8 storyboards, which is odd because it probably features the most CGI of any of those games, but it makes up for it with a wealth of information on the world's vistas and more enclosed areas. CG images of places like Lindblum Castle and others are paired with cool, rough hashmark style sketches that details what the developers were thinking, including smaller elements, right down to the smallest detail. I find the more fantastical locations a strength of Final Fantasy IX. The return to the crystals, forests, mines, and ridiculously over-designed towns, bridges, and cities speak louder than the artificial, more realistic, and sleek designs that dominated the prior two games. More colors, more variety to the levels and sizes, which actually applies to the characters too. The authors must have known this, because compared to the Final Fantasy VII and 8 sections, there's tons more detail about every site you can visit on the world map, as well as individual house areas and tiny enclosures. 9's section unfortunately suffers from the most padding of the 3, with less detailed notes and revelations among the secondary cast, which is unfortunate as there were a lot of ridiculously fantasy-based creations, like Sid, who ends up being turned into a frog. There's also tons of weapon pages that feel like they're simply there to fill space, with barely any in-depth notes to validate their existence. The end of the book features some developer commentary among cast and crew that participated in the development of these and future Final Fantasy games. It lacks any of the big names. You're not going to find any awesome commentary from Nobuo Uematsu or Tetsuya Nomura here. It's more about the bit players, who designed elements like the combat systems, the pre-rendered backgrounds, and many other different roles. It's still interesting stuff to read. You'll get a better understanding of just how many different tasks there are within game development, and how it really does take a committed team to make a dream as big as an RPG a reality.
Compared to other archives, like the Final Fantasy VII Remake Ultimania, which I also did a review on, this collection has a lot less filler material.
If it looks like I've shown you a lot, I haven't. This is a 320-page monster. Sure, there's some swaths of pages that are simply images of locations, especially near the end of each of the games, like Final Fantasy IX. A page of Final Fantasy VII logo concepts? Whoa, look how exciting that is. And some collections of items or emblems or what have yous that no one would really look twice at. But compared to the exhaustive rendering of graffiti, street signs, and insignificant items in the remake Ultimania, there's a lot more to read, uncover, and examine here. More attention gets paid to the in-game characters and the events, including extra info about things that happened in other Final Fantasy media. You'll come away more learned as a Final Fantasy fan, instead of just being wowed at tons of visual designs, computer-produced images, and such. The remake's Ultimania is visual first, while this collection here is much more well-rounded and pays equal attention to characters, enemies, art, plot, and extra fan-favorite info and facts. It's a better value, in my opinion, but your own tastes will determine which book you'd enjoy the most.
If you're interested in the Final Fantasy VII Remake collection, I've got a video right here on the channel that'll help you decide if you want to get a copy of that for yourself or not. There's also tons of game content on Final Fantasy VII, games both past and in the future, ready for you to check out. Gamers, thanks so much for checking this one out. I hope it's been helpful. It's always good to see you, and I hope you've had a great start to 2024. See you next time.